UN warns against Israeli draft legislation to ban UNRWA in Gaza Strip. France's new Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, survives motion of no confidence. Welcome to World Today with me, Renee Fong. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that Israeli draft legislation that would stop the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency from working in the Gaza Strip and West Bank would be a catastrophe if enacted. He said he has raised his concerns with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
In the midst of all the upheaval, UNRWA, more than ever, is indispensable. UNRWA, more than ever, is irreplaceable. That is why I've written directly to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express profound concern about draft legislation that could prevent UNRWA from continuing its essential work in the occupied Palestinian territory.
The Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in Israel's parliament approved 2 bills on Sunday essentially aimed at ending UNRWA's activity and privileges. One bill seeks to prevent UNRWA from operating any institution or providing any services or activity. The second bill deems that UNRWA workers would not enjoy immunity or special rights enjoyed by other UN workers. Guterres noted that such a measure would suffocate efforts to ease human suffering and tensions in Gaza. He added it would be a catastrophe in what is already an unmitigated disaster. UNRWA provides education, health and aid to millions of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. Guterres also criticized the constant evacuation orders given by Israel to Palestinian civilians living in Gaza. He said around 400,000 people are being pressed yet again to move south to an area that is overcrowded, polluted and lacking the basics for survival.
There is something fundamentally wrong in the way this war is being conducted. Ordering civilians to evacuate does not keep them safe if they have no safe place to go and no shelter, food, medicine or water. And no place is safe in Gaza and no one is safe. International law is unambiguous. Civilians everywhere must be respected and protected and their essential needs must be met, including through humanitarian assistance.
Large swaths of Gaza have been reduced to rubble since Israel launched its military assault on the Palestinian territory. Israel has pummeled Gaza by land, air and sea as it targeted Hamas, displacing almost all of its civilian population of 2.4 million people at least once in the past year. A series of Israeli strikes hit Hezbollah's South Beirut stronghold, causing massive destruction and razing 4 buildings after the Israeli army warned residents to evacuate. The National News Agency said Beirut's southern suburbs are still being subjected to a series of strikes, the latest of which hit the main road at Al-Kafat and caused massive destruction. It added 4 adjacent residential buildings collapsed in the Burj al-Barajneh area after the recent Israeli attack. Beirut's southern suburbs have been the target of intense Israeli strikes for several consecutive days. The Israeli military issued a new evacuation warning for residents, especially in specific buildings in Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has its headquarters. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Lebanon it could face destruction like Gaza as Israel ramps up its ground offensive along the southern section of the Lebanese coast. The Israeli military had sent the 146th Division into South Lebanon, the first reserve division to have been deployed over the border. Israel expanded operations in the area nearly a year after it began exchanging near daily fire with Hezbollah in the wake of the Gaza war. Qatar has launched an air bridge to transport medical supplies and food aid to Lebanon more than 2 weeks into intense Israeli strikes on the country. Qatar's Minister of State for International Cooperation, Lawal Al-Qatar, said Doha was working on medium and long-term plans to contain the humanitarian crisis. She explained that Qatar launched the air bridge with consecutive planes carrying food, shelter materials and medical supplies. Lebanese Health Minister Firas Abiad said the Qatari aid will help cover shortages of medical relief and support supplies. It will be a vital push for the hundreds of thousands of displaced and injured people. A French plane carrying medical aid also landed in Beirut, one of several plane loads of aid that arrived at Lebanon's only international airport since the escalation of hostilities began. The United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Iraq, Egypt, Jordan and Romania are also among the countries that have sent aid to Lebanon. Russian attacks on Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv have killed at least 2 people and wounded more than 30 others. Kharkiv, which lies in northeastern Ukraine near the Russian border, has been hit by relentless attacks for months. Head of the Kharkiv region, Oleg Sinagubov, said the victims were a woman and a man in their 70s. Ukraine also reported civilian deaths in the south and east of the country. The head of the southern Zaporizhia region, Ivan Fedorov, said a 71-year-old man was killed in a drone attack as he traveled in his car in the village of Primorsk on the Dnipro River south of the regional capital and close to the front line. A woman whom the victim was traveling with was admitted to hospital but survived the attack. In the east of the country, where heavy fighting rages on, authorities said that a Russian attack killed 1 person and wounded 6 others in the town of Konstantinivka. The head of the Donetsk region, Vadim Filashkin, said Moscow's forces had dropped 3 guided aerial bombs on the town, hitting 2 residential buildings. And Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has dragged on for more than 31 months. France's new Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, has survived a motion of no confidence brought by the left, a first test for his government, whose support in Parliament is fragile. The motion, which would have needed 289 votes to be adopted by a majority of the 577-seat National Assembly, was supported by only 197 lawmakers. The left-wing New Popular Front coalition had put forward the motion, with Socialist Party leader Olivier Faure defending it. But he admitted that it was soundly beaten. The motion failed because the far-right National Rally clearly voted against it, with Parliament roughly divided between 3 equal groupings of leftists, centrists and the far-right. Finding political consensus is a tough ask. Barnier, a right-wing former European Union Brexit negotiator, was appointed by President Emmanuel Macron in a bid to bring stability after inconclusive legislative elections in July. The 73-year-old premier has since sought to firmly take the reins, cautioning that France faces a financial crisis if its budget deficit is not narrowed, and warning of tax rises for high earners. Indian-administered Kashmir has elected its first government since the restive Himalayan territory was brought under New Delhi's direct control, as voters backed opposition parties to lead its regional assembly. Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government cancelled Kashmir's partial autonomy to control its affairs in 2019, a sudden decision accompanied by mass arrests and a month-long communications blackout. Since then, the territory of some 12 million people, divided between India and Pakistan and claimed by both in full, has not had an elected local government. Instead, it has been ruled by a governor appointed by New Delhi. While voters took part in national elections in June when Modi won a third term in power, these were the first local elections since 2014. Supporters celebrated as results were announced, with an alliance of the Opposition National Conference and Congress parties to form a government. Election Commission figures showed the alliance had won 48 of 90 seats in the assembly, with Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party coming a distant second with 29. Some called the vote a de facto referendum on the federal government's decision to repeal the territory's special status. Welcome to our ASEAN segment, where the 44th and 45th ASEAN summits officially commences today. With the theme Enhancing Connectivity and Resilience, Laos is focusing on transforming the country into a center of regional integration. Myanmar will send a Malaysia is represented by Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Other ASEAN leaders present at the opening ceremony were Sultan of Brunei, Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah, Thailand Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, Philippine President Ferdinand Ramires Marcos Jr., Timor-Leste Prime Minister Xanana Gusmao, and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. Meanwhile, Indonesia was represented by Vice President Ma'ruf Amin. Datuk Seri Anwar is expected to deliver a speech in a plenary session with ASEAN leaders. He is then scheduled to attend several related summits, such as the ASEAN leaders interface with representative of ASEAN Interparliamentary, followed by the ASEAN leaders interface with representatives of ASEAN Business Advisory Council, and also the ASEAN leaders interface with representatives of ASEAN Youth. After that, the Prime Minister is expected to have a closed-door bilateral meeting with his Singaporean counterpart and will conclude the day by attending dinner hosted by Malaysian Ambassador to Laos at the Rumah Malaysia in Vientiane. Myanmar will send a representative to the ASEAN summit this week for the first time in 3 years as the junta struggles to quell a civil war. And the conflict will be high on the agenda as leaders from ASEAN meet in Laos from today, although more than 3 years of efforts to find a diplomatic solution to the crisis had no impact. ASEAN barred Myanmar's junta leaders from its summits in the wake of their February 2021 coup, and the generals have refused to send non-political representatives instead. However, Myanmar, one of 10 ASEAN member states, has sent a senior foreign ministry official as its representative to the three-day meeting in Vientiane. Junta Chief Min Aung Hlaing attended an emergency ASEAN summit on the crisis in April 2021, but the bloc has refused to invite him to regular gatherings since. Ang Khao Mo, permanent secretary at the Myanmar Foreign Ministry, attended a meeting of foreign ministers on Tuesday ahead of the main summit. Sending a representative to the meeting comes 2 weeks after the military issued an unprecedented invitation to its enemies for talks aimed at ending the conflict. Indonesia hosted talks on the Myanmar conflict last week involving ASEAN, the European Union and the United Nations, as well as numerous anti-junta groups. Malaysia will take over as ASEAN chair after the summit, and Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Mohamad Hassan said the Jakarta meeting showed that talks must involve all parties in Myanmar. Indonesian President-elect Prabowo Subianto has embarked on a whirlwind diplomatic tour ahead of his inauguration this month, showcasing his plans for a bolder foreign policy than the one under his predecessor. President Joko Widodo prioritized Southeast Asia's biggest economy over foreign policy over the past decade, not once attending the UN General Assembly in New York. But Prabowo has visited more than a dozen countries since his election win on 14th February, pledging stronger relations with all. Prabowo's destinations in the 8-month transition period have painted a picture of his bid to deepen alliances while sticking to Indonesia's traditional non-aligned path. He made China his first stop after the presidential vote before trying to boost trade and defense ties on visits to Turkey and Russia. Prabowo then signed a key security deal with Australia and headed to France to discuss military cooperation. Prabowo's flurry of visits also included Japan, Singapore, Serbia, Papua New Guinea and Vietnam, where he announced an upgrade in ties. Still to come, Brazil's court lifting a ban on Elon Musk's social network X. Stay with us. Brazil's Supreme Court is lifting a ban on Elon Musk's social network X, which was blocked in its biggest Latin American market for over a month amid a row over disinformation. Judge Alexander de Moraes said in his ruling that he authorizes the immediate return of the activities of the social platform after X settled millions of dollars in fines for failing to comply with a series of court orders. He gave Brazil's communications regulator 24 hours to make the platform previously known as Twitter accessible again to its millions of Brazilian users. Moraes has for months been embroiled in a standoff with the world's richest man over a flood of online disinformation related on Brazil's 2022 election campaign. On 31st August, the tensions came to a head when Moraes dramatically blocked X for failing to deactivate the accounts of dozens of supporters of former far-right President Jair Bolsonaro and to name a new legal representative in Brazil. The row, which pitted freedom of expression against corporate responsibility, was closely watched worldwide. Rescue workers in Brazil were searching for 2 people, including a 6-year-old girl, after a landslide in its northern Amazonas state, which injured a dozen others. The landslide triggered the collapse of a port on the Solimões River, a tributary of the Amazon in Manacapuru municipality, about 100 kilometers from the state capital, Manaus. Manacapuru police officer Mauro Soares said rescuers were searching the rubble and river for a man in his mid-30s and a girl aged 6. 10 people were injured, 2 of whom were still being treated in hospital for their injuries. The authorities did not reveal the possible causes of the landslide, but they warned that a severe drought in the Brazilian Amazon could cause riverbanks to collapse and cause a natural disaster. The Deputy Secretary of Civil Defense, Clovis Araujo, recommended that riverside communities implement contingency plans to avoid new tragedies. Brazil has suffered in recent years from recurring landslides and floods caused by extreme weather events attributed to climate change. And according to official figures, nearly 9 million out of Brazil's 215 million inhabitants live in areas at risk of landslides or floods. China has decided to impose provisional tariffs on brandy imported from the European Union, marking the latest salvo in an escalating trade row between Beijing and Brussels. The two are major economic partners but have butted heads in recent months over Beijing's generous subsidies for its domestic industries. Brussels argues that the support undermines the principle of free competition and helps drive down the prices of Chinese exports, undercutting European competitors. Beijing has denied the claims and accuses Brussels of protectionism. China launched an investigation this year into EU brandy months after the bloc undertook a probe into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies. The investigation had preliminarily determined that imports of certain brandy originating from the European Union were being dumped, threatening substantial damage to the domestic brandy industry. The Commerce Ministry in Beijing said from Friday operators will have to pay a corresponding guarantee to Chinese customs when importing EU brandy into the country. It said the amount would be based on calculations involving prices approved by customs as well as import taxes. In the United States, storm-battered Florida braced for a direct hit from Hurricane Milton, which strengthened back to a Category 5 storm as the second huge hurricane in as many weeks rumbled toward Florida's west coast. A sense of looming catastrophe spread as people raced to board up homes and flee. The National Hurricane Center said Milton returned to the maximum Category 5 designation, generating maximum sustained winds of 270 kilometers per hour. It added fluctuations in intensity are likely while Milton moves across the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but Milton is expected to be a dangerous major hurricane when it reaches the west central coast of Florida Wednesday night. Governor Ron DeSantis ticked off town after town and county after county that are in danger. He said that basically the entire peninsula portion of Florida is under some type of either a watch or a warning. Airlines put on extra flights out of Tampa, Orlando, Fort Myers and Sarasota as highways clogged up with escaping traffic and gas stations sold out of fuel. Across the southeastern United States, emergency workers are still struggling to provide relief after the first storm, Helen, which killed at least 230 people across several states. In sports, Iniesta retires from football after 24 years of career. Stay tuned. Former Barcelona and Spain midfielder Andres Iniesta announced his retirement on Tuesday after a glittering trophy-laden career spanning 24 years. Iniesta, 40, was at the heart of the Spain and Barcelona midfield during a period of sustained success for both teams in the late 2000s and early 2010s. The technically gifted Iniesta made 131 appearances for Spain, scoring the only goal of the 2010 World Cup final with a last-gasp strike to earn his country victory over the Netherlands as they lifted the global title for the first time. He also played a key role in Spain winning the 2008 European Championship to snap a 44-year trophy drought and was named Player of the Tournament when they successfully defended the title in 2012.
Lo que me permitiréis que me emocione hoy, nunca pensé. De emoción, de orgullo, no son lágrimas de tristeza, son lágrimas de ese niño de Fuente Alvilla que tenía el sueño de ser futbolista y lo conseguí.
Iniesta won 9 La Liga titles with Barca, 4 Champions League titles, 6 Copa del Rey crowns, 2 UEFA Super Cups and 3 FIFA Club World Cups. Many of them alongside Xavi Hernandez, a rival for the accolade of being described as the best Spanish footballer of all time. Runner-up for the 2010 Ballon d'Or behind Messi, Iniesta called time on his magnificent spells with Spain and Barcelona in 2018 and moved to Japan to play for Vissel Kobe. In tennis, second seed Alexander Zverev scraped through to the last 16 of the Shanghai Masters on Tuesday, winning 2 tie-breaks against the Netherlands' Thailand Griekspoor in an ill-tempered match that ended 7-6, 2-6 and 7-6. Novak Djokovic, meanwhile, powered through the third round, steamrolling Italian Flavio Cobolli 6-1, 6-2 in just over an hour. Zverev's first set against 40th-ranked Griekspoor was overshadowed by the German's prolonged expletive-laden exchange with the umpire when he disagreed with a call. The world number 3 claimed the first set but proceeded to fall apart in the second, with the Dutchman breaking him in the first, third and fifth game. Zverev squandered an early lead in the third set tiebreak, but an unforced error on Griekspoor's part saw him crowned winner. In contrast, Djokovic, a 4-time Shanghai champion, completely dominated 30th-ranked Cobolli, breaking him in the second and sixth games of the first set. Djokovic fired off 19 winners in the victory, spending just over an hour on court. Djokovic will next play Russian Roman Safulin, who upset France's Tiafoe in 3 tight sets. Elsewhere, Russian teenager Mira Andreeva made a winning start to her campaign at the Wuhan Open on Tuesday, beating home wildcard Wang Shiyu 7-6, 6-3. The 17-year-old produced some of her best tennis under pressure, edging the tiebreak in the first set before sending a backhand winner down the line to clinch the only break of the match in the second. Andreeva will now play her older sister Erika Andreeva in the second round. It will be the first professional meeting between the pair, who will become the third set of sisters to face each other in a WTA main draw in the past 10 years. The last meeting between sisters was in Lexington in 2020 when Serena and Venus Williams played each other for the final time. Over to sailing, Sweden dominated their Women's America's Cup group to make the event's semi-final on Tuesday, with the Dutch and Spanish teams also qualifying in testing conditions off Barcelona.
Between the two of them, and a small mistake.
The Swedish team, who have been able to get more practice on board the AC-40 foiling boat than some other crews, set the pace with a controlled performance in a shifty Mediterranean breeze. At the end of the 8-race series, Sweden topped their group, which also included Australia, Canada and Germany, to make the 6-boat semi-final scheduled for Friday. Canada, who had a dramatic nosedive and near capsize in Tuesday's first race, then suffered equipment failure on their high-tech boat, which put them out of the remainder of the event. This damage also had repercussions for the other side of the draw between Britain, France, Italy, New Zealand, Switzerland and the United States, which had to be delayed by 2 days. And that's all the updates we have for you this afternoon. And in our top story today, UN warns against Israeli draft legislation to ban UNRWA in Gaza Strip. Do join us again this evening at 8:30 p.m. on saluran Berita RTM and TV1. Or you can always stream us online on RTM Click's website and mobile app. Till then, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I'm Renee Fong. Thanks for watching. Have a pleasant afternoon.